They fined me $1,500 for my own boat, yeah? You heard that right, 1,500. One morning, the HOA just marched down my driveway, slapped an orange notice on my front door, and announced my lake was now community property. Imagine the nerve. What they didn't realize was I had the deed locked away in my safe, and that deed doesn't just cover the shoreline, it covers every single inch of that 30-acre stretch of blue water they've been fishing in for years. So when they tried to ticket me, harass my family, even burn down my shed just to force me out, well, I decided to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. Let's just say when the sheriff pulled up and I handed him the original property map, the HOA president's smile sank faster than her overpriced bass boat. Yeah, that happened. But hold up before I tell you how I turned their fake fines into real felony charges. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching, from what time it is, and don't forget to subscribe, because this is one HOA story you're going to want to hear till the last line. See, I grew up on that lake before there were ever HOAs or those cookie-cutter houses or matching mailboxes and manicured lawns. Back then, it was just open land, pine trees, the sound of water lapping against the dock my father built with his own hands. My parents, Henry and Laura, bought that place back in the 70s when the county was still dirt roads and barbed wire. Dad was a carpenter with a stubborn streak, and Mom taught 4th grade at the little school down the road. I didn't buy land. Dad always said I bought peace. We'd sit together at sunset listening to frogs and crickets, and he'd tell me the world was only going to get louder, so you had to build your peace where it stayed quiet. Our deed was different too, because the way those old parcels were divided, my family wound up with ownership of the entire lake bed and water rights. That's 30 acres of calm, glassy water. It felt normal to me as a kid. Home was just home. Our closest neighbor was a half-mile off, a retired park ranger who swapped fishing stories with Dad over a couple cold ones. Everything changed when I turned 12, though that's when the developers rolled in. The bulldozers roared through the woods, laying down roads where deer trails used to run, and before a year was out, luxury homes popped up on the hills across the water. White fences, sprinklers, folks who thought rural living meant bringing their city rules right into the country. Soon enough, a sign appeared, "Welcome to Pinerest Estates, a deed-restricted community." At first, we didn't care. Progress happens, right? But then this guy, Greg, showed up in a crisp polo holding a fruit basket and a clipboard. "Good afternoon, I'm Greg from the HOA board. We're thrilled to have you in the neighborhood." Dad, still wiping sawdust off his hands, just raised an eyebrow. "We're not in your neighborhood," he said. Greg pretended not to hear. "Well, technically, all properties around Pinerest are considered part of the extended community. We'd love to invite you to join." He went on about maintenance, community events, and here it comes, shared access to the lake. That's when Dad's smile vanished. Shared access? Greg nodded eagerly. Residents have a right to enjoy the lake as a community feature. Dad didn't even blink. "Son, my wife and I own this lake. The whole thing. County records are public if you need to check." Greg stammered a bit, handed us a glossy pamphlet, and left. We figured that'd be the end of it. It wasn't. A few months later, a letter came packed full of legalese informing us our boathouse needed repainting. Our dock was unsafe, and the natural shoreline was unsightly and should be replaced with turf grass to maintain visual harmony. Dad just crumpled it up and tossed it in the fireplace, muttering something about harmonizing somewhere else. But that didn't stop them. Greg came back this time with 2 other board members in matching polos. They stood around pointing at our house and dock like they were surveying a crime scene. Dad said as little as possible, but when he came inside, his jaw was tight. "They're trying to strong-arm us into joining," he said, claiming our rustic look is hurting their property values. Mom asked if they could make us change anything. Dad shook his head. "Nope, we're not under their rules, but they're sure acting like we are." That's when the real harassment started. More letters, some requests, some thinly veiled threats. HOA folks started wandering down our driveway, inspecting the flowers, even walking out onto our dock to fish. When Dad confronted them, they'd just smile and claim, "It's a community lake, sir. Our dues pay for improvements." Dad laughed, a low, sharp sound that made them flinch. Buddy, my parents didn't build this house, and I didn't grow up here just to be told what I own. You're trespassing. That night we hung a little sign, private property, no trespassing. It didn't do much. Then county inspectors started showing up, zoning animal control. Even a wildlife officer about a dangerous animal. Our dangerous animal was Buck, a 12-year-old golden retriever who loved tennis balls and peanut butter. Mom kept hoping it would die down. Dad just said, they understand. They just think the rules make them powerful. By 16, I could set my watch by their schedule: Tuesday a letter, Friday an inspection, Sunday strangers fishing. Then came the day 2 HOA reps showed up demanding limited shared access so the community could enjoy the water. Dad just led them to the dock and pointed. You see that post? That's my property line. Next one too. Every drop between here and the far shore belongs to my family. One guy scoffed. That's not how lakes work. Dad just looked him in the eye. That's exactly how this one works. Check with the county recorder. That night a flyer landed in our mailbox. Lake Beautification Initiative, standardized dock materials, community fishing events. Dad just shook his head. They're building a paper fantasy. Sooner or later it'll sink. And he was right. The HOA's real goal was control over land water, anyone who wouldn't bow to their bylaws. But the thing about growing up on a lake, you learn patience. You learn that folks wading too deep eventually realize how cold it gets. The HOA's new president, Marlene, was the worst. Yet she lived across the lake in a house with 3 garages and a flagpole she probably saluted every morning. She sent a courtesy notice that read like a threat. We understand you are not official HOA members. However, community standards apply to all properties affecting the neighborhood aesthetic. Non-compliance may result in county-level enforcement. Dad laughed so hard he almost spit out his coffee. Then the real psychological warfare began. Noise complaints about our cookouts, anonymous tips about our dock, polluting the lake with old boats. They said the same boats that had been there since before any of them moved to the county. Then the fishing club. At first, a few folks casting lines, soon folding chairs and coolers, beer cans in the shallows, rods draped across my dock like some kind of challenge. Oh, says this lake's community property now. You can't just hog it, one guy sneered. Dad just said, son, this isn't a lake you rent by the hour. It's my property. 5 minutes to reel in. They didn't come back for a while, but the storm was brewing. As the years rolled on, the HOA got meaner. Health department on our septic system, unregistered structures, even reports about Buck again. Every letter added another wrinkle to my parents' faces. Then one day, Dad clutched his chest in the kitchen. Mild heart attack, doctors said. Even in the hospital, Dad worried more about the land than himself. They want to wear us down. This place is worth every fight. I promise to help. He recovered slowly, but the HOA didn't let up. A week after he got home, Marlene showed up with a fake smile and a clipboard. So sorry to hear about your health, Henry. Maybe it's time to sell. Mom just glared. This is our home. Marlene just shrugged. Pressure on non-conforming properties tends to increase. Dad's hand tightened on his cane. Ma'am, you'd better leave before I forget my manners. Dad passed away a year later, peacefully, they said. But I think peace had been a stranger for a long time. The funeral was quiet. Unbelievably, 2 HOA board members showed up in black suits claiming to pay respects. Mom knew what was coming. 3 weeks later, a letter, our deepest sympathies. Concerns regarding property maintenance and curb appeal. That was the day I saw my mother truly angry. 30 years we've lived here, 30 years of harassment, and they can't even let us grieve. From then on, all HOA contact went through me. My letter was sharp enough to cut glass. Do not contact my mother again. Further interference will be treated as harassment and reported. Of course, Marlene showed up again in person, softer tone, but same agenda. Your mother's alone. The house is a lot of work. The HOA could help find a buyer. I cut her off. The answer's no. Next time you show up, I'll have the sheriff waiting. Mom lasted another 18 months, but after losing Dad and living under siege, her health just faded. Before she died, we sat on the porch, sun melting over the water. "Promise me," she whispered, "don't let them take this place. This lake is your father's legacy." I promised, and I meant it. After her funeral, I stood on the dock where Dad used to fish, staring at the still water. I realized I'd lost both my parents, and the HOA had taken enough. That's when grief turned into energy. I couldn't just sit still, so I started a small business, Lake Day Rentals. Kayaks, canoes, paddle boats. All legit with county permits and insurance. For a while it was beautiful, families, laughing locals, loving the peace. That's when the HOA pounced. One June morning, taped to my shed, notice of violation, unauthorized commercial activity on community property. Fine $1,500. I laughed a real belly laugh. Community property, my foot. I crumpled the paper, figured that'd be the end wrong. 3 days later, Marlene showed up in her golf cart, clipboard, waving, making a scene in front of my customers. "You're operating a business on community property without HOA approval." I kept my cool. "Marlene, this isn't your property. The business is fully licensed and your HOA has zero jurisdiction." She raised her voice. "Fine has doubled to $3,000 and legal action is next." I told her to leave before I called the sheriff. She smirked. "This isn't over." After she left, a couple renting kayaks apologized. "We live with an HOA too. Some folks just let power go to their heads." I told them, "Yeah, HOA stands for harass our area. Didn't you know?" That night I sent a formal letter, property not part of the association, lake and water rights legally. Mine further harassment will result in legal action. Didn't mention the deed yet. Let them dig their own grave. Suddenly the fishing club camped out daily, blocking my customers, blasting music, leaving trash. I started documenting everything. Video, photos, spreadsheets. Dad always said, when idiots talk, just make sure you write it down. Harassment escalated. Rental sign, knocked over trash bags, dumped paddles, stolen and found by HOA members. Then fake online reviews, Lake Day Rentals is illegal, unsafe. All posted within minutes of each other, no profile photos. Classic Marlene. I upgraded security cameras, lights, locks, insurance. But I refused to shut down. Let them play checkers. I was playing chess. They thought it was community property, but every blade of grass, every drop of water was in my name. Then came the fire. At 2 a.m, Buck's barking woke me. My shed was ablaze, and inferno flames lighting up the trees, smoke rolling over the water. I called 911, stood outside in my pajamas watching my parents' legacy burn. The fire inspector found accelerant arson. Whoever did it had spray painted my cameras first. Marlene showed up that morning smiling, sipping coffee. "Maybe this is a sign commercial activities don't belong on residential property." I snapped. "Get off my property now." Later, a ransom note letter appeared in my mailbox. "Next time your house." I called the sheriff and the fire marshal filed reports. I rebuilt stronger, smarter with fire-resistant materials and a security system wired to my phone and a monitoring company. No more playing nice. I hired my dad's old lawyer, Bill. We sat at his oak desk, reviewing the deed. "Ironclad title," Bill said. "You're sitting on gold." We sent certified notices to every HOA member. Property lines clear, informal permissions revoked, any further access is trespassing. Signs went up, private lake, no trespassing, violators prosecuted. I photographed everything. The community went ballistic, angry calls, petitions, ranting on forums. But the harassment slowed finally. That breathing room was all I needed to rebuild both the shed and my strategy. Then the HOA filed a lawsuit, accused me of denying historical access, emotional distress over lost fishing rights, even demanded I pay damages. My lawyer laughed out loud. We filed a counterclaim: harassment, defamation, trespassing, arson, and attempted conversion of private property. Asked the judge to sanction them for wasting everyone's time. Courtroom day. HOA members lined the benches. Marlene strutted in, all pastel and nerves. The judge wasn't having any of their nonsense. Bill rolled out exhibits, deed surveillance, financial records, and then a buried meeting note: apply enhanced enforcement tactics on Reynolds' property until compliance or sale achieved. Evidence of a targeted campaign plus financial irregularities, embezzlement, shell companies paid by the HOA, all tied back to Marlene and her husband. It all unraveled emails, proved conspiracy plans to pressure me out, even the timing of the arson. The judge tossed out their case. Upheld my deed, referred Marlene and the treasurer for criminal investigation. I finally smiled, the weight of years gone. Headlines the next day. HOA faces fraud probe. Board members resigned. Marlene and the treasurer got charged. The fishing club ringleader Duke, turns out he set the fire, got 5 years for arson. The community collapsed. The HOA formed a voluntary association with no power to bully. Thomas, my neighbor, became the new coordinator. He came by, apologized for everything, asked if we could ever work out lake access for residents on my terms. I remembered Mom's words, don't let bitterness decide what peace should look like. So I set the rules, the fees, and the don't mess with the owner clause. Folks respected it. Families came and the lake healed one cast at a time. Later, I partnered with a land trust, locking the lake into conservation forever. No HOA, no developer, no bureaucrat would ever claim it again. That night, watching the sunset from the dock, Buck by my side, I whispered, "You were right, Dad." The world did get louder, but I learned how to keep it quiet. So if you're watching this and you've ever stood up to an HOA or a bully, neighbor, remember the law might be slow, but the truth always rises to the surface, just like a lake after a storm. Have you ever had to fight for what's yours? Drop your story below. Let's talk justice, and don't forget to subscribe, because next time I'll tell you about the HOA president who tried to ban barbecue smoke and lost.